again for another night, and we thank God for an opportunity to come back to this word, especially when it deals with faith. And we know that faith is one of the greatest things of value in a man's life that he can have. Faith is greater than material things, it's greater than money, silver, and gold, especially when you have faith not in man or in the things of the world, but when we have faith in God, it's the greatest treasure and assets that humankind can have. And sometimes that faith is tested by the things that's of this world, but don't get discouraged when we are tested in our faith, because we know that trials and tribulation strengthens our faith when we go through things and we keep our hands in God's hand. It shows us that we are overcomers of the things of the world, and that through faith, we can do all things through Christ, which strengthens us. So when we look at Hebrews tonight, if you will, come back to Hebrews chapter 12. And I wanted to tarry here just a little bit longer because it really illustrates to us in this day and time what faith does. And when you think about faith, there are three things that we're going to look at tonight that faith does. If you will, jot this down. Faith sees the invisible. Faith believes the impossible. And faith brings the incredible. Faith sees the invisible, things that we can't see with our naked eye, but we believe that they are there because God said it. Faith believes the impossible, things that we never thought that we could accomplish, but by faith, believing in God, that faith believe the impossible things can be done. And then faith brings for the incredible. Faith brings the incredible. Things that the world said that we would never be able to have, never be able to accomplish. But through our faith through God, we receive things that is incredible, over and beyond, above and beyond of what mankind said that we can have. It's an incredible thing to have that kind of faith in God. And when we think about tonight, I came back to Hebrews, and we know that this is some of the writings of Paul, ascribed to Paul. But when we, excuse me, still got a little sinus that is draining, but be praying for me tonight. But when we come back to these writings about faith, Paul takes his time to give us the definition of what faith is, but also shows us those who had believed in God by faith and the things that they had accomplished. Wasn't easy, the things that they had to go through, but through faith, they was able to make it to the end. So when I look at this tonight, I want to start here in Hebrews chapter 11 and verse 21, if you will. It said, by faith, Jacob, when he was dying, blessed both of his sons, Joseph and worshiped, leaning upon the top of his staff. And we know that Jacob was father of Joseph. And he blessed Joseph's two sons because he's saying that God's favor had settled on his son Joseph. And I'm going to tell the story tonight a little later as to how did they get to this point and why he is mentioned here in the book of Hebrews. And when you look in the text, we will find here that when it gets to Joseph, it talks about more than it talks about the rest of the Herodians that is in the Bible here. It said in verse 21, it said, by faith, Jacob, when he was dying, blessed both of the sons of Joseph and worshiped, leaning upon the top of his staff, upon his cane. And then in verse 22, it said, by faith, Joseph, when he died, made mention of the departing of the children of Israel and gave commandment concerning his bones. Now we know that Joseph was a Herodian in the Old Testament and the things that he did. We're going to talk about that tonight. And he exemplified that sure faith in God for the stuff that he went through because he believed in God's word. If you will tonight, come with me to Genesis. Come with me to Genesis 37. Genesis chapter 37. And we're going to talk about tonight this family of Joseph. But we're also going to talk about how Joseph's faith was incredible in God. It believes the incredible. In verse 1, it said, and Jacob dwelt in the land wherein his father was a stranger in the land of Canaan. These are the generations of Jacob, and Jacob is Joseph's son. Jacob is Joseph's father. And then it goes on and mentions Joseph. It said, Joseph, being 17 years old, was feeding the flock of his brethren. And the lad was with the son of Behal, and with the sons of Zilpah, his father's wives. And Joseph brought unto his father the evil report. In other words, Joseph came and told his daddy that, hey, these boys, my brethren, they ain't doing what they ought to be doing, representing your household. And that from that point, they didn't like Joseph because they figured that Joseph was a telltale, but Joseph was trying to tell them the right thing to do and trying to lead them, but even him being the youngest of all. But when we got down to verse 3, it said, now Israel loved Joseph more than all his children because he was the son of his old age. He was the youngest of all of them. And he made him a coat of many colors. And he didn't really understand what this coat was going to do. But when he made Joseph a coat of many colors, it was a beautiful coat. And his brothers got jealous because of the coat that his father had made him. And then in verse 5 and verse 4, it said, when his brothers saw that their father loved him more than all his brethren, they hated him and could not speak to him peacefully unto him. They hated their brother because they saved the love that the father had for the younger son. But there was not only a love that he had for them, but his dad had seen something special in Joseph. And he had such a love for Joseph because, yes, he was the youngest, but there was something that's different about Jacob than his other son. I went down to verse 5 and it said, Joseph dreamed a dream and he told it to his brethren and they hated him yet the more. Now, we can't control what God brings to us. But if we believe God's word, we don't mind sharing it with others, what God has said. And when Joseph shared his dream with his brothers, they hated him even more because God had said in the dream that he was going to elevate Joseph and he was going to bless Joseph. And his brothers didn't want to hear that. And when we got down to verse 5, and Joseph dreamed a dream and he told it to his brethren and they hated him the more. And he said unto them, hear, I pray you, this dream which I have dreamed. For behold, we were binding sheaves in the field, and lo, my sheaves rose up, and also stood around upright. And behold, your sheaves stood round about and made obedience to my sheaves. In other words, he said, when God elevated me, my brethren, they bowed down in the dream that I had. And they gave reverence to how God was using me and what God was getting ready to do to me. Now, Joseph was dreaming this. His brethren didn't agree to it. They said, man, you the youngest. We ain't going to bow down to you. But when you got favor from God, it don't make no different what your age is. It don't make no difference what people perceive about you. If God is getting ready to elevate you, ain't nothing that nobody can do about it. If we walk in what God has told us. Went down, we got to know the power of God. And if God give us something, don't be afraid to speak it out. And Joseph here was not afraid to speak what the Lord has said. I went down to verse 6, and he said unto him, hear, I pray you, this dream which I have dreamed. For behold, we were binding sheaves in the field, and lo, my sheaves rose up, and also stood upright. And behold, your sheaves stood around about and made obedience to my sheaves. And they bowed down in respect unto me. And his brother said unto him, shalt thou indeed reign over us? And shalt thou indeed have dominion over us? And they hated him yet the more for his dream and for his words. They got mad at him because God was getting ready to use him because of his faithfulness to him. And let me just go ahead and say this tonight. Sometimes when we try to do right by God, That don't mean that other folk ain't gonna have some jealousy or hatred because they see God getting ready to bless you and see God is blessing you in your life. His daddy had already elevated him, but at the same time, his brothers hated him not only for that, but now he's telling them that God is gonna make me ruler over you. They really hated him more then. In verse 9, and he dreamed yet another dream and told it his brethren and said, behold, I have dreamed a dream more. And behold, the sun and the moon and the 11 stars made obedience to me. In other words, he said, heaven bowed down in the dream that I dreamed. And I got to put a pin here tonight because when you got power with God and favor with God, and even the heavens recognize that you have authority in God, that says a lot. And when he told them that he had authority not only on earth, but heaven gave obedience unto the power that God had gave to him because of his faith. Went on down, verse 9, and it said he dreamed another dream and told it to his brother and said, behold, I have dreamed more dreams. Behold, the sun and the moon and the 11 stars made obedience unto me. I didn't say it, the Bible says it here. And he told it to his father and his brethren, and his father rebuked him. Wait a minute, boy. And said unto him, what is this dream that thou hast dreamed? Shall I and thou mother and thou brethren indeed come to bow down ourselves to thee on or in the earth? Daddy couldn't believe it, and his brothers envied him. They was jealous of him. But his father observed the saying. He said, something is going on here in my son. Because the way he's speaking, he believes that God is speaking to him. And he's not afraid to tell us what God had revealed unto him. His father rebuked him for saying it, and yet he studied and observed what his son had said. He wondered what all of this meant. But when I looked at this after his brethren had got jealous, go down to verse 12. And his brother went to feed their father's flock in Shechem. And Israel said unto Joseph, he told him to go and find his brethren. And as he went to find his brethren, he got lost. And one of the herdsmen where his brothers had been told him that his brothers are down in another part of the country, and go down there and you will be able to find them. And when he got down to where his brothers was, coming into verse 18, and when they saw him afar off, even before he came near unto them, they conspired against him to slay him. Now, this is their own brother. And because they hated him because of jealousy and because of favor that God had put on him, they decided they were going to kill him, their own brother. But the oldest brother stepped in. To go to verse 19, and they said one to another, behold, this dreamer coming. In other words, here he is telling us about all these dreams that God had gave him. And let me just put a pin here tonight. If God give it to you, don't be scared of it. And don't be afraid to mention it. If God says, look, you're going to be this or you're going to be that, he's letting Joseph know to walk in it, and I will be with you and I will keep you. But Pastor, how he's going to walk in it and God's going to be with him for what is going to happen to him that is coming up? But God always have a plan. And when I looked at this in verse 22, it said, and in verse 21, and Reuben, the oldest brother, heard it. And he delivered him out of their hands and said, let us not kill him. He's our brother. Shed no blood, but cast him into this pit. And this is in this wilderness, and lay no hand upon him, because he's our brother, that he might rid him out of their hands and deliver him, unto his father again. Now, the older brother had a little sin. He said, we ain't going to kill our brother. And if I can get these other hard-headed brothers to leave him alone for a little while, I'm going to come back and get him and take him back to daddy's house. But something happened in between him, Reuben, getting ready to being able to take him back to his father's house. It go down to verse 23. And it came to pass when Joseph was coming to his brother that they stripped Joseph of his coat of many colors that was on him. His daddy had made that coat. It was a beautiful coat. They was jealous of the coat, not only jealous of Joseph, but also of the coat. And they took him and cast him into a pit. And the pit was empty. There was no water in it. Ain't that something? They didn't care nothing about their little brother. Just cast him in out of evilness. And then in verse 25, and they sat down to eat bread, and they lifted up their eyes and looked, and seen a company of Israelites came, carrying spices and balm and myrrh, going to Egypt. And as they was joining through, and Judah said unto his brethren, what profit is it if we slay our brother and conceal his blood? Now here he is, instead of delivering his brother out of love, he decided, let's make a profit. We ain't gonna kill him. We're gonna make some money off of him. But what we're gonna do, we're gonna sell him into bondage, their own brother. But I don't care when folks sell you out. If you got the favor of God, God gonna bring you out. And I just want to say this tonight and put a pin there. No matter what folk is trying to do to you, if God has a plan for you, when other folks sell you out, God will bring you out. I went down to verse 26, and it said, and Judah said unto his brethren, what profit is it if we slay our brother and conceal his blood? Come and let us sell him to the Israelites, and let not our hand be upon him, for he is our brother in our flesh. And he and his brethren was content. Everybody was satisfied and agreed with it, even though it was the wrong thing still to do. They didn't kill him, but they have no business selling him out either. So I went on down, and I'm gonna just put another pin here. Don't get so upset when folks sell you out, when they're supposed to be close to you, and then you find out they done sold you out and sold you down the road. Don't be upset, because God, if he's in the plan, and if your hand is in the master plan, and you got faith in God to believe that God gonna do just what he said, exceeding above all that we can think of ask. If you have that kind of faith in God, don't worry about when folks sell you out. Don't worry about when they turn their backs on you, because God got something for you. And as I was looking here at verse 29, and Reuben returned into the pit, and behold, Joseph was not in the pit, and he rent his clothes. Here it is, the big brother again. He was going to try to come back and get him and take him to daddy, but the other brothers had already sold him out. And then I went down to verse 30, and he returned unto his brethren and said, the child is not, where is he? And they took Joseph's coat, and then they killed the kid. They killed the goat and put blood all over it, and took it back to their father's Jacob, and told Jacob that an animal must got a hold of him. And one lie on top of another lie on top of another lie. And know they had sold their brother into slavery. But guess how much they got for him? $2,560 that they got for their brother. So they made money off of that evilness, but they didn't understand that money couldn't buy what God had gave Joseph. And money ain't everything. People sell you out for a little nothing, because that little money didn't last them no time. We're going to find that out in a minute. But I went over to chapter, if you will, come with me to chapter 39. And we're going to find out what happened to Joseph when he got down to Egypt, when he had been sold into slavery. And the Bible said here in verse 1, and Joseph was brought down to Egypt to Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, captain of the guard, an Egyptian, bought him of the hands of the Ishmaelites, which had brought him down thither. Can we put a pin there tonight? Now here he is, been sold into slavery. But look how God worked. The one that they sold him to was under the king of Israel. Matter of fact, he had charge of Pharaoh's army. He was next to the king, and God, not only when his brothers brought him down, but God put him in an elevated place. Ain't that something? When look, he could have ended up landed anywhere in Egypt, bought under any person that had some authority. But God seen fit, when somebody else sold him out, he landed him in the palace to the captain of the king's charge. And then in verse 2 it said, excuse me, and the Lord was with Joseph, and he was a prosperous man. Wait a minute. He's in slavery, but he becomes prosperous. Why? Verse 2 again, and the Lord was with Joseph. I don't care what folk do to you. When the Lord is with you, you're going to prosper. And the Lord was with Joseph, and he was a prosperous man. And he was in the house of his master, the Egyptian. And his master saw that the Lord was with him. Can we put a pin there tonight? Now here he is, been sold into slavery, to the Egyptians who did not worship God, but they worship out of God. But they understood and knew by the favor that God had upon Joseph that God was with him. Ain't that something when the enemy recognized that you're walking with God? And here he is in verse 3. He's saying the master saw that the Lord was with him, and the Lord made all that he did to prosper in his hands. He became successful even in being sold after being sold into slavery. And Joseph found grace in his sight and served him. And he made him overseer over his house. And watch this, over all that he had, he put his hands to. Everything that the captain of the Egyptian, the captain under, which is Potiphar under the king, everything he had, he put it in Joseph's hand. Why? Because he seen the favor of God, the faith that Joseph had in his God all over him. And then in verse 5 or verse 6, it came to pass, process of time, they made him overseer of the house. Go down to verse 6, well, the second part of verse 6. And the Lord blessed the Egyptian's house for Jacob's sake. And the Lord blessed the Egyptian's house, not for the Egyptian's sake, but for Joseph's sake. God will put you somewhere and bring favor to the place that you are. He'll prosper where you are. Even when you are being held down by somebody else, God is prospering not because of their faith, but because of your faith. And God let the king prosper during this time in verse 5 or verse 6, and he left all that he had in Joseph's hand, and he knew not all he had. In other words, he trusted Joseph so much because he seen the favor of God on him. The king didn't even know how much money he had. He didn't know what his wealth was. He put all his wealth in Joseph's hand, a slave that'd been sold to him. But they seen the favor of God upon Joseph, and they seen the faith of God, seen the faith of Joseph in God. And in verse 7, and it came to pass after these things that his master's wife, now here comes trouble. When you try to do good for God, now here it is, Potiphar's wife comes to Joseph and try to get Joseph to lie with her. But because he was an honorable man and he loved God, he would not lay down with Potiphar's wife. Verse 9. Well, verse 8, and he refused and said unto his master's wife, behold, my master wanted not what is with me in this house. In other words, he said, Potiphar, my master don't know what is with me in this house. Here it is, Potiphar's wife is trying to sleep with Joseph. And Joseph uttered these words, Potiphar, my master does not know what is with me in this house. He's talking about Potiphar's wife. And what is with me in this house, and he had committed all that he had to my hand. Now, verse 9, there is none greater in this house than I, Joseph said. Neither had he kept back anything from me, but thee. Now, he said that Potiphar had given me charge over everything that he had. I can do whatever I want with anything that he got. But one thing that he did not give me was to have control over his wife. And because that Joseph was an honorable man, he didn't want to do that because he knew that Potiphar had said, you can have anything I got, but just don't mess with my wife. And because Joseph was honorable, he did not do it. Verse 8, he refused and said unto his master's wife, behold, my master's would not what is in this house, and he had committed all that he had to my hand. There is none greater in this house than I. You got to know your position when God has showed your favor. He knew that he had authority, but he knew he was going to use that authority right because he had faith in God that where he was right now, he didn't go there to stay. And some of us may be in bondage right now to some things of this world. But if you got faith in God, I want to tell you tonight, don't go there intending to stay. Trust God that if you do right by God, even in the circumstances that you are, that God gonna do right by you. And Joseph said, I don't want to mess my blessing up by taking Potiphar's wife, which I know that I didn't have no business with. We had to be careful because the world will offer us things to make us compromise because we under bondage and they think they got us held down and got their foot on our neck. So they'll offer some little stuff to make us compromise who we are in God. Joseph said, no, I love the Lord. And anything that is going to be against God, I'm not going to do. I went down to verse 10, and it said, and it came to pass as she spake to Joseph day by day. Now, she didn't just try Joseph one day. It was a continued thing, day after day after day by day. She kept coming, trying to entice Joseph. And then in verse 11, it came to pass about this time that Joseph went into the house to do his business, and there was none of the men of the house there. Now, won't the devil make it a way that when he'll move everybody out, when you think that ain't nobody looking, he'll sure enough come back and try you again. Well, you know, ain't nobody looking now. Ain't nobody gonna know that you did this or you did that. So she picked a day that everybody was out of the house but him, but Joseph and her alone. Verse 11 came to pass by this time that Joseph went in to the house to do his business, and there was none of men in the house where there within. And she caught him by his garment, saying, lie with me. And he left his garment in her hand and fled and got him out of there. And it came to pass when she saw that he had left his garment in her hands, he fled forward. Now here come more trouble. Ain't that something? Y'all excuse me tonight with the sinus. But ain't that something when you're trying to do right by God? Then the devil always is steady coming after you every kind of way. And then in verse, she called unto the men of the house and spake unto them, saying, see, he had brought his Hebrew unto us to mock us. Now she's talking about Joseph was trying to lie with him, with her, and she was really the one that's trying to lie with him. He came into me to lie with me, and I cried out with a loud voice. And it came to pass when he heard that I lifted up my voice and cried, and he left his garment with me and fled and got him out. Now, can we put a pin there tonight? But sometimes the devil will get us in some show enough awkward situation to make us look like we guilty. How can he explain that when the wife of the house is saying that he was trying to get with her? How could he explain that away? Ain't nothing else he could do with that. But he did not lose faith in God. And what I'm saying tonight, when it looked like ain't nothing gonna work out, when it looked like all your hope is gone, don't lose your faith in God. When the king found out, he put him in prison. But even in prison, God showed him favor. I went on down in verse 19, it came to pass when the master heard the words of his wife, which she spake unto him, saying, after this manner did thou servant to me, and his wrath was kindled. The king got mad, and Joseph, master, took him and put him into prison and placed him into the king's prison with bound. And he was there in the prison. But the Lord, somebody said, was with Joseph. Seems like when things get worse and get worse than worse, but he kept his conviction and faith in God. And the Bible said in verse 21, but the Lord was with Joseph and showed him what? Showed him mercy and gave him favor in the sight of the keeper of the jail. Now, ain't that something? When he went to Potiphar's house, he found favor with Potiphar. Now he's in jail, and he done found favor with the jail keeper. And the keeper, verse 22, the keeper of the prison committed to Joseph's hand all the prisoners that was in prison. And whatsoever they did, he was the doer of it. Even in prison, in his lowest state, God gave him authority. And he became over all the prisoners in the prison. And then go down to chapter 40, verse 1. And here Joseph tests with the Egyptian society. It said it came to pass after these things that the butler of the king of Egypt and the baker had offended their lord the king. And the king threw the butler that kept his house, the doors of his house, and the baker, and threw him in jail for a certain period of time. And while they was in jail, verse 2, and Pharaoh was wrought against the two of his officers, against the chief of the butler and against the chief of the bakers. And he put them inward in the house of the captain of the guard, in the prison, the place where Joseph was bound. Now, they could have put him in there anywhere, but by the hand of God, they put them where God wanted them to be. And they put them in the ward where Joseph was. And Joseph started talking to them. And they dreamed the dream, both of them, each man his dream. And one night, each man according to the interpretation of his dream. The butler and the baker of the king Egypt were bound in prison. And Joseph came into them in the morning and looked upon them, and behold, they were sad. They were depressed. Man, when we gonna get out of here? And look at Joseph. Now, he had been in there longer than they had. But look what he did. They complained. But he's talking about God. Don't be a complainer when you're going through what you're going through. When you've been falsely accused, or you've been accused for what you did, and you've been put in some places that wasn't comfortable. Don't complain. Don't be a complainer. In verse 6, and Joseph came unto them in the morning and looked upon them. Behold, they were sad. And he asked Pharaoh officers that were with him in the wards of his lords, watch this, house, saying, wherefore look ye so sadly today? They said unto him, we had dreamed a dream, and there is no interpreter of it. And Joseph said unto them, do not interpretation belong to who? Interpretation belongs to God. Now look how Joseph brings his status up with God. And look what he said here in verse 8. And they said unto him, we have dreamed a dream, and there is no interpretation of it. And Joseph said unto them, do not interpretation belongs to God. Tell me then, I pray you. Joseph knew that he was working with authority. He said, tell me what your dream is, because guess what? I have authority, not only by the jail people, but I got authority by God, and that's why I'm in here. And Joseph knew his condition, where he was, it had to be the hand of God. So it never one time it said that Joseph complained about where he was. Wherever he was put, Joseph made the best of it. And because he trusted God and made the best of it, he elevated to the top every time. And here he is in prison. He is giving counsel to them that's coming behind him in prison and telling them to hold on. I looked at verse 9, and the chief butler told his dream to Joseph and said unto him, in my dream, behold, a van was before me. You see, you got to know who you are. And the chief butler told his dream to Joseph and said unto him, in my dream, behold, a vine was before me. In the vine were 3 branches, and it was as though it budded, and here and her blossoms shot forth, and the cluster thereof brought forth ripe grapes. And Pharaoh's cup was in my hand. And I took the grapes and pressed them into Pharaoh's cup. And I gave the cup into Pharaoh's hand. And Joseph said unto him, this is the interpretation thereof. The 3 branches are 3 days that you're going to be in here. Yet within 3 days shall Pharaoh lift up thine head and restore thee unto the place. He interpreted the dream for the young man and told him, man, you got hope. You ain't in here but 3 days. He said, lift your head up. Verse 13, yet in 3 days shall Pharaoh lift up thy head and restore thee into thy place, and thou shalt deliver Pharaoh's cup into his hands after the former manner when thou was his butler. He said, he's going to restore you back to your rightful place. But look at this. He said, but think on me. And I had to put a pin there. Joseph said, I have interpreted the dream, and in 3 days, you're going to be out of here. But when you leave here, don't forget about me. So many times when we reach out to help somebody and they get out of the ditch, and then sometimes man won't reach back and grab your hand and help you get out. And I look at that because we living in a sad world. And matter of fact, it's in the Bible right here. He made a promise, but we're going to find out what he did. Verse 13, yet within 3 days shall Pharaoh lift thy head and restore thee unto thy place, and thou shalt deliver Pharaoh's cup into his hands after the former manner. And verse 14, but think on me when it shall be well with thee, and show kindness, I pray thee, unto me, and make mention of me unto Pharaoh, and bring me out of this house. For indeed I was stolen away out of the land of the Hebrews. Y'all excuse me tonight. And here also have I done nothing that should put me into this dungeon. Now, ain't this something? When you know you hadn't did nothing to be placed where you are in the condition that you're in, and then you help somebody in there and hoping when they get out, they're going to help you, and then they forget about you. But when they forget about you, and God see your faithfulness, he didn't have to tell that man nothing. He could have said, I don't care, you interpret your own dream. But because he knew what he was in God, he went on and did the right thing. But then that man forgot about it, but God hadn't forgot about it. He had it there for a reason. And when I looked on down to verse 15, it said, for indeed I was stolen away out of the land of the Hebrews, and here also have I done nothing that they should put me into this dungeon. Then when the chief baker saw that the interpretation was good, and the baker and the butler had got out, I also was in a dream. He told it to Joseph. And behold, I had 3 white baskets on my head. And in the utmost basket, there was all manner of baked meat for Pharaoh, and birds that eat them out of the basket upon my head. And Joseph answered and said, this is my interpretation thereof. Now, one guy already done messed him up and told him that he was going to help him, and he ain't heard nothing else from him. Anybody been there before? When you done help somebody, and then they done forgot about you, they knew you was in distress too, and you done helped them to get out for you, got out of what you was in. And then they go on and forget about you. But then you don't give up because of your faith. You know, that's the kind of faith that God is talking about. That's the kind of faith that Hebrews is talking about. That faith that is unwavering no matter what. And when the world and when man do you wrong, you still willing to reach out that olive branch. You still still willing to reach out your hand to help somebody else, even though you've been hurt so many times. I went down, went down to verse, y'all, I went over. I didn't know what that, hey, got that late tonight. Hey, man, I tell you what. Excuse me for this silence. But I don't want to leave this alone because it's so important. We're going to pick up next week, right where we are stopping off tonight. I ask that you read ahead of me because we're going to look and see that God is no shorter than the word. And when things look the worst and they keep getting worse, and you don't give up on God no matter what, then how God would elevate and God would show the world. When everybody else throws the towel in on you, God said, I was standing right there and I hadn't left you. Why hadn't you left me, God? He said, because of your faith and because you believe in me enough when it looked like things ain't going to happen the way that you need them to happen. You still had faith and trust in me and waited on me until I came. And that's the faith of the Herodians that God wants to see in us. And next week, we're going to pick up the same place and we're going to move forward because I want to finish this story because it has so much power in it. And it also illuminates us today as to the kind of faith that we're supposed to have. So I bid thee farewell tonight. I'm going to ask that all will come on.